Hello everybody and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about columns and the mud flood because I do think there actually is a link between the two, and I'm going to show some repeating patterns and should be interesting. So let's get started now. What you're looking at on screen is the National Arboretum in Washington DC, and these columns in the background, I think they were taken from the Washington Capitol building, and we're going to try and learn just a little bit about these columns, but they can be found in the Old World, usually associated with the Greek and Roman civilizations. And I think the tallest columns that still exist are associated with this Temple of Jupiter in Baalbek, Lebanon, and I think they're approximately 20 meters, so over 60 feet tall. And the top portions of these columns can be referred to as a capital. So just if you hear me say capital in reference to these columns, I'm talking about the upper portions, and they come in a few different designs. We're going to be focusing on 3 of the different types of the designs, but the largest capital, the top portion of one of these columns that was ever unearthed, was in Turkey of all places, and I think it's over 6 feet, just the capital part, the top part of one of these massive columns. So just wanted to show you that, and in this case it's a Corinthian column, or the top of one. And yeah, we're going to be focusing on these 3 different styles or orders of these columns: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. And we see a lot of these scattered throughout not only the Old World as far as Greece and Rome, but we see it during the Renaissance actually. I wanted just to touch on those briefly. So I want to just look at some repeating patterns with respect to these columns. And here you have what is used as a bank. At least it was. I'm not sure what it's used for more recently, but you have these columns and these Ionic styled columns. And close to this structure, there is this other building which has been recently renovated, and I'm just pointing out how close they are. But this is what that building looked like, this Walker Power building. I think it was built in 1910 approximately. But underneath the building, they found a railroad turntable that was recently discovered, and they date it to the 1880s, but I think maybe it's buried because of this unknown event as far as our history is concerned. So yeah, railroad turntable dating back to 1887 was uncovered during redevelopment of the building. So this building has been renovated clearly, and you can observe the remnants of this old railway turntable. And they came upon the turntable beneath the northwest corner of the building, and you can see them trying to uncover a portion of it. And here is another image just showing the rest of this railway turntable, but it was located about 6 feet beneath the building's ground floor. And there's an interesting quote from the main contractor in charge of the redevelopment. He was just talking about how surprised he was of how intact the remains were. There was 0 demolition done. The timbers were there, the rails were there. They basically just buried it. So I don't think they necessarily just buried it. I think maybe it got buried during what we're calling the mud flood. I think it's what might have buried this railway turntable, and it might be older than they're suggesting. So that's one example. Now I want to move to England, Huddersfield, and there's another train station there, and we have these Corinthian styled columns front and center here. And this is an image from the 1880s showing the same train station. More recently, they actually uncovered another bit of railway history, and what they uncovered was another one of these railway turntables. During the project, the team of archaeologists uncovered 2 train turntables in a series of brick-built engine sheds. And again, they're putting it to the 1850s or so, but I'm thinking the age is older than what we're being told, and I think they give a date for the construction of this train station to the 1850s approximately, somewhere in there. But here's just the remnants of some of these sheds and railway turntables. It seems like it was buried. Now we'd be told this was intentional, but I think it might be because of what we're referring to as the mud flood. Now, sticking in England, there's another train station, the Curzon Street Station, and I think that the official history says this dates to the 1830s. But again, you have more of these columns. It looks like ionic columns in this case. But there was a project for the high-speed rail line in England, referred to as the HS2. And during this project, they uncovered something very interesting. They uncovered what is thought to be the world's oldest railway roundhouse. And here's an aerial view of it, but you could see here just remnants of other structures associated with the railway turntable. And I think this is the train station building up here. And I believe that this structure, it has 3 floors and a basement. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is I think there was an event, buried what was there previously, and then it was rebuilt after that. And this design was very common, the different architectural styles with the use of columns. And I think that came after, actually, at least in a lot of cases. And there's an image I got from a video where people were walking in this basement, and I just wanted to highlight this arch. Just wanted to kind of give a inside peek of people walking into this basement. But those are just some examples with regards to railway history, these railway turntables, and then what gets built on top are these structures that have these different architectural styles that integrate columns into their design. But we can carry this forward and go to Australia and Melbourne, and I think Melbourne founded in 1835, but they're building all these historic structures like this Federal Coffee Palace, and these were apparently hotels where they didn't serve alcohol. But a lot of them, just like so many buildings in Australia and outside of Australia, it was demolished in 1973. What I wanted to point out here is you've got this really ornate structure, plenty of these, it looks like Corinthian columns. This is just another image of that same coffee palace. And also, not only on the outside, but on the inside, plenty of these columns. But I couldn't find an example of a buried railway turntable in Melbourne, but Melbourne is known for its buried blocks. In 2017, archaeologists started finding all of these buried blocks that were previously unknown, and they've since uncovered many of them all throughout the central business district. And the official narrative is that city council decided to raise the street levels, and people were given a small period of time to leave, and the entire area was like buried in clay. And I guess I find that narrative questionable. But they also found traces of an iron foundry, Melbourne's first foundry and iron shipbuilder. It was called Langland's Foundry. But again, this early industrial history buried, just like those other examples with the railway turntables, this early industrial period buried during some event, in my opinion. And I just wanted to point out this Langlands is indicated by this arrow, roughly the area, and it would probably be over here. So it's well within the central business district area where a lot of these buried blocks are. So it's the same basic pattern, some event followed by these different architectural styles utilizing these columns, and some of the buildings very ornate, and then they get destroyed. So I just wanted to point that out. And yeah, you can go to Charleston, South Carolina, and once a walled city, but now that's largely buried. We're told intentionally here. In this case, 9 feet of this wall is buried beneath the present grade ground level. And you get structures that are sitting on top now that are more historic, and they feature a lot of these columns. And I think this is just the United States Custom House in Charleston, South Carolina. And there's this park called Cannon Park in South Carolina, which featured this structure here, and I think it burned down in the 1980s. But what survived were these 4 columns. And in this case, actually, the columns, they have a brick interior. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And even in Europe, you can go to Belgium, and there was a palace that stood for hundreds of years, the Coudenberg Palace. And we're told it was destroyed by a fire in 1731. And every trace of this prestigious palace simply disappeared underground for many years. But there's a museum you can go to underground and inspect some of the remnants of it. But What got built on top of this site is the Place Royale. It can be referred to as the King's Square or Royal Square, but it's a group of these neoclassical buildings. It looks like Corinthian columns in this case. And with regards to this palace, they found a lot of artifacts from the 15 to the 1700s associated with this palace. And I think that what happened here might have been what happened to a lot of these places that I've been featuring in this video. I think it might be connected potentially, but the same pattern, it holds true. You know, you have the more historic structures sitting on top with the columns, and then underneath you have these older structures, but a lot of artifacts from the 15 to 1700s anyway. So I just wanted to point that out. And there's an interesting courthouse in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And I think we're told this portion of the courthouse is from 1905, but on the sides of this structure, there are these grates. And if you look down, you can see what appears to be more red brick and just buried arches. And there's even another grate. There could be another level, who knows. But this design that we see a lot, that's associated with like the 1800s typically in North America, Australia. I think it could be older itself than the 1800s in a lot of cases. But what's hidden within a lot of these exteriors is, I think, a much older core that dates back to this earlier period, which was buried during what we call the mud flood. So I think that's the basic point I'm trying to get to, is mud flood came first, then what people call Tartaria, or I would refer to as the old world. So I think that is the order of things, at least in some cases. So I think I just wanted to hit on that and talk a little bit about these columns and the mud flood and show some basic patterns. So I think that's all I have for you for today. I want to just leave off by thanking my patrons once again. Your help and support, it's always greatly appreciated. So I thank you very much. So with that being said, until next time, take care. Bye.